I thought this was cancelled because of the weather. I'm not used to LA people staying. So a couple of things. I was originally told that we were going to have a panel here with a lot of people objecting about 5G, but apparently they've run away because of the rain. So, you guys are the die-hard group, and what I really wanted to talk about was the differences that we're seeing with the tests that we're doing with 5G and 4G with our encoders. Has anyone used our encoders? Okay. I think that most of what we're referring to when you talk about 5G and video is using the bonded abilities of a device. I'm going to actually grab one of our bonded pieces of gear so you can actually understand how we're doing it and what we're doing. So give me 30 seconds to get undressed and put it out my bag, because those that have been in the room next door may not know that we had to get out of there by 3 o'clock, and thus I had to be out of there and in here. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what we've been doing over the past few years, and why is 5G of interest to us, and how many people is it going to sterilize at the same time when using it? So cellular bonding has been used predominantly over the last 20 years, from first bonding 3G signals, where we were getting approximately 500 kilobits per second, to today, where we're, with 4G we're getting 30 megabits per second sustained, and everything that we do in the business that we're in is really different from when someone tells you at home, oh, I got 100 megabits per second, because tests that we do are never sustained, right? You don't get a sustained 100 megs per second. Even here yesterday, where I was told that I got a really good connection, and I was doing a speed test in my booth for a sustained. It was peaking at 19 to 20, but then went down for a series of to about 500 kilobits per second, and then back up. So I would always recommend that if you are in the business of streaming, that you do look at what your sustained bit rate would be. You can Google those and find them, and there's a manual setting in the sustained one that comes up first that allows you to download 100 meg file to your computer and then play it out over the multiple connections and test. So 4G bonding, we're getting 1080p at say 4 megabits per second, and that's been doing well for us. But everyone is really excited about 5G, and I think one of the biggest problems we have at this point in time is that 5G is not equal to every, one 5G's connectivity is not comparable to another 5G. I've seen different rates from a Verizon 5G connection than I have with an AT&T 5G connection. I've even seen better 4G than I have 5G. My fear is that it is really becoming a marketing ploy from a lot of the carriers that is not really serving our industry well, when what we're expecting is really truth increases in throughput based on 5G connectivity. what I was demonstrating next door, for those that did get to see it, was streaming 4K content. And if you'd have asked me yesterday, do I think that 4K is going to be something, within the next year that is going to be driving our industry, I wouldn't have been too excited about it. But this morning, I was having that discussion with one of the chaps I work with from the Emmy committee, and he says, well, no one's going to be streaming 4K because, let's face it, you're not even going to see it on the phone, and most of the people are watching everything on the phone today. At that point, I took him outside, and I was pulling a 4K stream to VLC on my phone over a 5G connection outside, and it absolutely looked incredible. And I would like to share that with anyone that would like to see it, because I think for us it definitely is a game changer for us. And the ability to get the bandwidth that we need in order to send a reliable 4K stream will be heavily dependent on a 5G connection. So, are most of you guys from the local areas? All spread around? Do you have 5G in your cities? No? Nobody? Is there pushback from your cities? Are you aware? Yes? Yeah, we have a lot of pushback from where I live, and it's like politics. There are those that are for it, there are those that are against it. Personally, I think that if you're going to, start suddenly worrying about 5G, you're about 10 generations behind when we should have started worrying about it. But it seems to me that it's the juggernaut that's rolling out, and it's not going to stop. So, I think we'll be back in the same place by soaking up 10, 20, 30 megabits per second when streaming 4K content. If you'd like to have a look at how we do that, we use these things called nodes, and they are 5G compatible. We put a 5G SIM in there, and they'll connect to the 5G networks that are available. What we're seeing is that the latency is very, very good. What we're seeing is that the bandwidth, I'm not seeing massive jumps. I'm seeing, where I would get 3 megs, 4 megs sustained per SIM on a 4G connection, I'm seeing about 9 or 10 over 5G. Is this enough for me to get a stream out? Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we'll also get to that point where we won't need to use bonded. We will actually just use single cell. The advantage of using single cell and not bonding is that the latency is much, much lower. I think that's something that is very, very important for a lot of the industries that we're working in. Latency seems still to be something that, depending on the industry, we're working a lot in post, we're working a lot in production, we're working a lot in police forces using video and using cellular to get those feeds either to the officers in the field, or recently we were involved in the fires that were happening in Southern California, where they were using bonds inside the helicopters. We were using external 5G antennas to connect to the towers, and we were sending those feeds down to an app that we have to the firefighters in the fighting the fires. The reason that there was a big push for this year, and it was very important to get it out, is because last year, you may remember that there was a fire in Ventura County where they had helicopters. There's the terrain, big hill like here, firefighters down here, and the flames are coming over the hill. Well, they had a helicopter filming the fire coming over, but they weren't able to send that to the firefighters because they didn't have a way to. And the fire came over the hill with 8 seconds. These eight guys were burnt to death because they didn't see what was coming. So, now we're utilizing 5G for this, and happy to say that this year we deployed that app that allows us to invite people to view securely. Everything that we do is encrypted. In the area of the fires. I mean, this is very different for wanting to stream, to Facebook or YouTube or any other CDNs that you want. 5B, you'll use 5G as you would 4G, right? It's just going to mean more. But what do we do when we get more? We use it, right? Doesn't matter if I give you, $10 today, you'll spend it, and if I give you $100 tomorrow, you'll spend it too. And this is what I'm seeing. If the more I give someone for bitrate, they'll just enable the bitrate. They'll just crank it up, because in the world that we're living, typically more bits are a better picture. Has anyone got any questions for me? Yes.
You were saying that it's quicker.
The latency. Well, the reason the reason latency is less is because we're not bonding. If I'm bonding, right? When I bond carriers, right, and the reason that we bond carriers is for reliability, typically, as well as aggregation of bandwidth. So if I'm taking an AT&T, a T-Mo, a Sprint, and a Verizon SIM in my backpack, because I'll bond all those 4 together, I'm sending them up into the cloud, where I then have to have a program that waits for all the bits to come in. And as we know, in video, we're dealing with frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4. I have to wait until all those frames come in, order them in the right order, and then send them out to the CDN, right? So I'm really at the beck and call of the slowest SIM, right? Typically 4 seconds, is acceptable here in California. If I'm not doing bonding, because I'm getting higher throughputs on a single 5G connection, then my latency can be a lot lower, because I don't have to wait for that slowest connection.
What is the difference that you're finding?
You're going to go down to about half a second. And in some environments, a half a second is well, in some environments, latency is important. Not for everybody. If you're streaming to Facebook, is it really important? No. But if you're streaming to firefighters, or if you're streaming to, we're involved in a lot of, let's say, security operations. Whether this be a SWAT team that's launched a camera inside a location with a cell modem in order to get that feed out of that location. Latency is the difference between a successful operation and not. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of improvements in what we do, moving maybe into using some different protocols as well, maybe using a WebRTC protocol to do ultra low latency over cellular, and bringing it down to something more like 400 milliseconds, right? So definitely, latency for us is going to make a difference. We also do a lot of work in the post industry. Is anyone here from the post industry, post-production? Yeah, so we stick surprisingly enough, we put a lot of our encoders on the outputs of AVIDs, right? And let's say that, anyone ever seen that movie, or not movie, that program, Big Little Lies, right? So I'm working with the post company of Big Little Lies, and they've got an encoder outputted of their colorist machine, and we're sending it up to the cloud, and Nicole Kidman is in it, and I think Reese Witherspoon is in it, and both of them have put their own personal colorists, which is very nice. And we're sending it up to the clouds where these two supporting people are watching live what the colorist is doing. And in that environment, latency was very important because they're trying to interact with a with a live session that someone's editing. And the colorist said to me that the fact that we were able to use cellular connections on the downlink, because both of these people, one was on the East Coast, one was on the West Coast, meant that they could actually improve. They could bring a production down from 3 weeks to 3 days because they could actually get those feeds to different people. But again, doing all of that encrypted and secure, and building a 5G into our receivers will also be critical for us. We own Teradek owns a company called Small HD, right? And they're a monitor manufacturer. So one of the projects that we're working on is building a decoder with a 5G SIM inside. That means that you can actually view a feed from anywhere in the world, not just on an iPad, but also on a proper monitor, and thus be on set anywhere and view a feed from a camera. And latency again is going to be critical in that environment. So that's why we're closely looking at 5G and closely working with the vendors. We're also working with FirstNet, which is the US private AT&T first responders network, which is done on band 14 of the cell signals, and being able to support those also is something that we're working hard to do. Any other questions? No heckling? Nothing? Yes?
So, I think that everyone seems uber excited for 5G.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. I mean, you do a lot with it. You don't seem all that excited.
Me?
Yeah.
That's true. Because I haven't seen the I haven't seen the claims live up to the claims. I haven't seen the 100 megabits per second. I haven't. I've been quite disappointed in the 5G that I'm able to get in California at least. But that's, I think, because of the marketing. AT&T calls their 5G 5GE, which is not really 5G. So I think when you're trying to compare apples with apples, I think we're still a way away from seeing what really 5G can give us. So, but again, I think that as soon as 5G is available, 4K will become normal, and we'll just use it up as we've used 4G on. It's going to be a very useful tool for us to use. Is it going to change our industry? It will for 4K. I had someone on the stand yesterday telling me that they want to look at 8K. I mean, 4K, 8K, nothing moving forward will be possible if we don't move to 5G and we don't move, the needle to the next stage. So, I'm optimistic that we'll get there, but I think that we're still at the very early stages of 5G deployments. Yes, sir.
So if you could wave a magic wand, would you invest in ubiquitous 4G, or would you invest in 5G? I don't think it's one or the other. I don't think
I mean, I would almost say 4G is ubiquitous around California. I mean, I don't think I go anywhere where I can't get 4G. I think that we still see a lot of the towers having bottlenecks at the towers, right? Which, again, if they deploy 5G, I hope that it's an end-to-end solution, or we won't see the benefits, right? Yes?
Yeah, so I'm excited about 5G. I'm kind of pessimistic about how much effect it can have on it, because it seems like there's a lot of limitations on 5G, line of sight or distance to, to the tower. And so if you're right by a tower, there are a lot of blocking structures that get it like that. Is that how you see 5G?
Well, where I've been testing is in areas that, I'm working with the carriers that they've done a good job of putting in their own, well, they've invited me to their locations, right? So they're showing me the best that they have. And there's certain campuses that they have, there's certain locations that they have. So, we're pushing as much as we can push over it. But you're right, as soon as I step out of those areas. I mean, I was driving down the 10 freeway yesterday where my AT&T said I had 5G connectivity, and you do a speed test and it's really no better than 4G. So that's where I think we've got to be careful. I don't want to run forward blindly thinking 5G is going to solve every problem that I have with regards to bandwidth. I still think that we're going to have to do bonding for redundancy purposes, right? And my fear again is how saturated is the tower going to be, which is typically the problem, because typically when you give people more bandwidth, they'll use more bandwidth. Right, so we'll be back at square one again.
John,
Yes.
when you said that you were driving along the freeway and you only did a speed test, what kind of impact does slicing have on that 5G? Is that just the way they sliced it for that network? So if you did put the demand on it, you would get more bandwidth?
If I do what, sorry?
What effect does slicing have?
Right.
So if you had that speed test that said you only got your bandwidth is only as good as 4G, but you used it for something that was a high bandwidth demand, would slicing give you that bandwidth that you want?
I don't have that ability to select the method that I use. I'm given what I'm given, right? And you would assume that I would assume that I still think that there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be upgraded, right? So even if I'm connected to a 5G tower that has a T1 line connected back to the internet, that's my bottleneck, right? And I think that that's the misconception that a lot of people are assuming that in the village that I live, we have 2 towers that have, bonded T1 connections to the internet. So they could give me 6G and it won't help, right? So I think that's kind of why I'm cynical too. And I think I've proved to myself that 5G in downtown LA is worse than 4G down at the beach, So we'll see how it rolls out. But for us in the streaming world, where sustained is the only thing that we need, right? Because we're streaming, we need a constant bit rate. Peaks don't help us, right? So that's to be seen. Well, I welcome anyone that wants to get a link from me to see the 4K stuff, because I think it definitely is going to change the way that we stream. And if you believe what they're telling us about 5G, we will all be able to watch 4K content on our phones with ease. And I'm hopeful for the next year ahead, because I think that's where we're going to be moving to, kicking and screaming. Thank you, guys.